All right, and welcome back to Calling Out Controversy on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Tell me, we have a very special guest with us, Dick Pound. So, Dick, thank you for being with us.
Fun to be with you.
So, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm in real life. I'm a lawyer in Montreal. My hobbies have always included higher education and the Olympics, and I've been very involved with McGill University in Montreal as a double alumni and or alumnus, and I've been chair of the board of governors and chancellor. And in terms of the sport and the Olympic movement, I was more years ago than I care to remember, a double finalist in Rome in swimming.
Oh, wow.
And I was the president of the Canadian Olympic Committee and got co-opted as a member of the IOC, and I've been on the executive board there for the best part of 20 years until the early 2000s. And at the moment, I'm the senior active member of the IOC.
Oh. So, you've had quite the varied career then with both higher education and the Olympics.
It's been a lot of fun. I must say I've enjoyed almost all of it.
So, I got to ask this question just because I don't know if you're aware of where Siena College is located, but we're located a little bit south of Lake Placid, where, of course, the Winter Olympics took place back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And do you recall anything, especially because it's such a big thing here, the miracle on ice when the United States beat the Soviet Union in ice hockey?
I was at the game.
Oh,
In fact, I had a fun footnote to that is, for some reason or other, I ended up with a couple of extra tickets.
hmm.
I thought, God, there must be somebody that might be coming and see this. So I went down to the front, and there were a couple of kids there, and I said, I've got 2 tickets for the game, and would you be interested? They said, oh, yeah, give us the tickets. Thank you. I said, no. I'm not giving them to you to sell. I'm giving them to you if you come in with me and you watch the game. And so they did. I think somewhat disappointed that not being able to turn a profit, but I'm sure that once they saw how the game unfolded, they were happy to have been there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something to show because, like, I mean, I'm a New Yorker, I'm an American myself, and it's something that kind of just shows, I mean, just how country pride can come through within something such as the Olympics, even though it's not something that's supposed to be a political stage or a military stage or something to that nature.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was kind of at that point, as you know, the United States was hosting Winter Games in Lake Placid,
Yeah.
and at the same time was trying to destroy the games in Moscow as part of President Carter's eventually unsuccessful campaign for a second term.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of become something of where, and we saw this more with FIFA with the World Cup, especially with under Sepp Blatter than with the Olympics, but it kind of becomes more of a political thing of some nature. I mean, there's talk now that the United States will, we don't know how official it is or if it actually will happen or not, but there's some talk, or at least some people want the United States to postpone or boycott the Olympics in 2022 because they're located in China due to the whole entire Uyghur, um, everything that's going on with them.
Right. Well, it's you can see why people try and think of things like that. It's usually because they're either unable or unwilling to do something themselves, and so they want somebody else to do it. And that was very much what happened in the Moscow boycott. America and several other dozens of other countries stayed away, sort of sacrificed all their Olympic athletes for absolutely no gain whatsoever. There was no impact at all on the Soviet conduct, which in those days had been its intervention in Afghanistan to prop up one of its puppet regimes.
Yeah. And I mean, like, for some people, I mean, I was talking with somebody where, like, I said to them that I don't see any point in the United States boycotting the Olympics in 2022 because it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't stop the tragedy going on with the Uyghurs. It didn't do anything with the U.S. and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. it doesn't do anything. But then he responded with like, yeah, well, doesn't it also provide money for the Chinese government then through the Olympics?
Well, the way the Chinese have done it and the way the Japanese have done it, yeah, there's some money coming in from the the outside revenue sources, but it's a very small fraction of the cost or the investment in the games, and it's certainly not funds provided by governments.
Where do the funds come from then?
They come from basically from selling sponsorship and television rights
Oh,
and
okay.
tickets.
So it's pretty much just. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, it's not a government enterprise at all. And I think, if you really wanted governments to get together, and clearly some of them are rightly upset about the conduct, the government should act. I mean, and they know how to send messages in diplomatic terms to the Chinese. I mean, they could say this, nobody from the United States government will accept any invitation to the games, no matter who it comes from. And if you could get a whole bunch of the major allies, France, Germany, Britain, Canada, Australia, and so forth, then you could send a really, really strong message to the Chinese. And it's the Chinese Communist Party that will get that message. But simply saying, we feel so badly about what you're doing in China that we're going to deprive all of our athletes from their human rights to participate in a voluntary action or activity like the Olympic Games, for which many of them have been training for 10 years or more.
Now, some people also, when it comes to this situation, will kind of have some questions arise of stuff like, how are these cities chosen? I mean, it's like their human rights record is known. Like this whole entire Uyghur thing is known now. I mean, was it known when it was China was chosen, or like any other, like with Qatar with all their problems with FIFA World Cup, and then that went into bribery and other things like that with Sepp Blatter. But do other things like the political climate or human rights records or things of that nature play into how cities or countries are selected for the Olympics?
Well, to some degree they do, and it's pretty interesting when you think of mighty China is in a final, down to the final two with Kazakhstan.
Okay.
And you look at that, and it's Goliath against David, and Kazakhstan came within 4 votes of beating China. So I would have thought that I'd been a member of the Chinese government, saying, "Holy smoke! This is not the kind of margin we would expect, given our importance as a sporting country and our demonstration that we're more than capable of organizing something on the scale of the Olympics." There's a message here for us, and I think they have not done much to take that on board. But that would the IOC decision was a lot closer than people expected, and frankly, it was a lot closer than I expected, and I've been around for quite a while.
Yeah, because this is also the second time within the last 15 years or so that China's also hosted the Olympics. I mean, I'm only 22 years old myself, and the first Olympics I remember were the 2008 Beijing Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, China's no stranger to hosting the Olympics. I mean, I take judo a little bit too in the area where I'm around here too, and Jason Morris is my judo coach, and
Mm-hmm.
he was the head coach of the Olympic judo team for the United States in 2008, where Ronda Rousey won a bronze medal, and they had a decent run in 2008. He himself is actually a silver medalist, I think in '96 he was. Yeah, but so China's no stranger to hosting the Olympics. It's just, I guess, the new thing is kind of like old look, new scandal for China a little bit.
Well, they have a tendency to be a bit tone deaf, and as a superpower, and they've become a superpower.
Yeah.
What's important is that you be predictable and that you understand that it is a world community. You can't, just because you've got lots of economic power, throw it around and take over the world. So I think, this may be a lesson that they have to learn the hard way, but I think if governments were organized on this, and they've got plenty of time to get organized, they're going to say, we are not going to punish our athletes. We are going to indicate the huge level of disappointment or anger or whatever it may be with respect to your international conduct. And no government will take any part in anything to do with your games. But we're not going to punish our athletes simply because you're behaving badly.
Yeah, because I know there are other international organizations where, now this is kind of in a way comparing apples to oranges, but like the EU, for example, won't take in, or is having a long time taking Turkey in because of Turkey's human rights record. Now, I know when it comes to stuff like the Olympic Games or the World Cup, or whether it be like international championships for like wrestling or basketball or whatever sport you desire, it kind of comes down to like, are we truly punishing the athletes by doing this, or is there a way for us to move? I mean, we recently saw within the United States them moving the baseball all-star game from Atlanta to Colorado in protest of some legislation that was just passed in Georgia.
Yeah, and you can, it's much easier to do something on a domestic basis, and probably much more impactful when it's on a domestic basis. In a worldwide event, it's much more difficult, and particularly when governments actually don't have any control over what goes on, in the sense of where the games are awarded. I mean, they can refuse to support a bid from their country, I suppose, but the sports and all those things, those decisions are completely out of the hands of government. But governments, nevertheless, can act together in their own spheres of influence and with their own particular recourses to send these messages to governments that are offside. And there's an opportunity for that to happen here. And I think if it's carried out well, the message will certainly be delivered. And that message is, no matter how big and important you are, there are international norms of behavior that if you're going to be a superpower, as opposed to simply a bully, that you have to take into account, and you have a responsibility to do so. And we are reminding you of that responsibility.
Yeah, because we've also seen other countries who are predestined superpowers, besides the U.S. and China, main focus point here being Russia, use the Olympics as a focal point to kind of leverage themselves into, or at least Putin did, to be able to do something that was kind of heinous and nefarious within annexing Crimea to increase his popularity within the country. This was, of course, covered in, I don't know if you're aware of it, the documentary Icarus. Icarus, sorry, my apologies, bad pronunciation, but I guess you are aware of it. But
oh, sure.
Yeah, I believe it won an Oscar, or at least was nominated for one.
I think it actually won one.
Yeah.
No, I had a speaking part in that.
You're also name dropped. That's actually how I found out about you fully, and then decided, like, oh, I'll reach out to him. Fun fact for you. And it goes into how Putin decided to basically use it as a kind of a get on the soapbox type of thing to get his message out, because his popularity was declining in Russia for a little bit. But then once Russia came in, and obviously we knew they were playing dirty tricks to help raise his popularity, and then he was able to do things like annex Crimea because his popularity was so high. He's pretty much just like Mother Teresa within Russia, because how he made them look on the Olympics, but now we know they were doing dirty things behind the scenes. But when you see things like that happening, where you see bad actors using the Olympics as a way to create a better image of themselves so they can do something like that, as somebody who's been a member of the Olympic Committee for so long, is that something you see often, or is it something that bothers you? Is it just something that's part of the game? What is it?
Well, certainly if you're a sporting nation, and yours is one, I think.
Yes.
The United States has had the more often than any other country. Yes, you're interested in international sport and so on. But it's also a chance to, show your country as you'd like it to be shown. Now, I don't think that anybody outside of Russia, and God knows how many in Russia were not impressed either, thought that Russia came out of Sochi with a good reputation. I mean, it's actually been trashed in all of the years since then. Quite over and above some of the political action. And I think the same will be true with China. China, it may fool some Chinese, but it's certainly not going to fool the rest of the world with respect to its treatment of its minorities and its clamp down on treaties, as is the case with Hong Kong and the treatment of the Uyghurs. Nobody outside of China thinks that that's acceptable conduct.
Yeah.
So it can be a poison chalice if you don't manage it properly, and I think that's an area of its international behavior that China should be thinking about as it's coming into this hosting opportunity.
We're here with Dick Pound on WVCR 88.3 The Saint, calling out controversy. And so with your answer right there, I just had kind of two questions that kind of spurred up in my mind from, and I'll ask you the first one, which is, as you point out, the United States is a very sports-heavy nation. I mean, it seems like almost every single decade or so we have a new sport that's evolving or something else. We have the NFL, MLB, we have UFC, boxing, everything. And when you talk about that, some people will kind of say, like, oh, why doesn't the United States get more opportunities to host the Olympics? Because we already have the infrastructure. We already have the ability to, we could do a multi-city Olympics if we wanted to because we have that much infrastructure. But to some, they only remember Lake Placid or Atlanta, both of which were before I was born. But that's a question that comes up here a lot in the United States when it comes to, like, cities hosting the Olympics.
Yeah, but you've had Los Angeles is in 6 years or so will be hosting its third Olympics.
Yeah.
Lake Placid had two, and there's Atlanta and Salt Lake City. I mean, the U.S. has been a real contributor to the Olympics, even from the early days. The third Olympics were not well remembered by very many people, but they were in west of the Louisiana Purchase
I can
year 1904.
I can look it up for you quickly.
It just slipped my mind.
1904.
It was supposed to be in Chicago, and then it went to St. Louis.
Yep, it was in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, and so it's been there from the very beginning, and I think there was an IOC member from the United States was in that first cohort of IOC members.
Oh. Well, I guess everybody in the audience is learning something new now, because I guess everybody kind of forgot how many Olympics the United States has hosted. Oh
no, it's the gold medal in terms of hosting for sure, and it's bid on other occasions too, and it's not it had to go three times to get 84 games in Los Angeles. They lost to Montreal for 76 and Moscow for 80, and finally got them in 84.
Oh, okay. And then another question that comes off that sense, part of that is also, part of that last question was that the United States has the significant sports infrastructure for it. Because, I mean, you go to pretty much every state in this country has a football stadium, for example, whether it be college, high school, or pro. But some people have also opted to point out that other countries who can't really afford it as much, the main stake in this being Brazil in 2016, that their Olympic stadiums are not being used. They were a waste of money. They're now just standing there. They're rotting. They're decaying. Now, granted, this is also a debate that comes up in the United States whenever a professional sports team wants to move or do a stadium, but for different reasons. But there are things like articles that come up all the time that show just like the Olympic stadiums decaying. Like there's one article I saw that said like this is what Rio's Olympic Stadium looks like 6 months after the Olympics, and it just looks like
and that's it's really not just a commentary on the Olympics so much as it is the corruption and incompetence of the team that was putting that effort together. I mean, that whole Olympic bubble
Yeah.
teetered on cataclysmic failure every single day of the games, and it didn't get any better as the games went on. So it's not, I think the examples of games that have been well organized and where there's been good planning going into, in the first place, they've actually been net contributors to the community at large. And even Atlanta, for example, they didn't need another track and field stadium. Lots of universities and so on in the area that have good tracks and all that sort of stuff. What they did need is to replace their baseball facility, and so they designed the centerpiece of the Olympic structure around what was going to become a baseball stadium after the games. As soon as everyone got on the plane to go home, down came the track, and out came the bleachers from the sort of the main hub. The corner of the track was actually sort of the area behind home plate, and so you ended up with a genuine legacy, something that the community needed, and they didn't waste the money building a stadium that was unnecessary. They invested in building one that they needed and that is still in use.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a smarter way of doing it than just the corruption and ineptitude that comes from other countries that host it.
It's a little bit like almost every sport where the backswing is a lot more important than people realize.
Yeah.
And so getting that backswing right and lining up and knowing what you want to do when you make your turn makes the difference between a really successful games and games that are less successful.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an example with there are certain times when basketball and hockey teams in the United States will share arenas. Football teams and baseball teams will sometimes share arenas, so that's kind of now not really as commonplace as it used to be. The Miami Dolphins and Miami Marlins used to do it, and then the Oakland Raiders and the Oakland A's used to do it, but people got tired of seeing the baseball diamond on the football field, so they got rid of that practice. But it's something that's become commonplace here in the United States. But moving on to another topic is that I know in the past you've also had something to do, or at least a big head within anti-doping within the Olympics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was the inaugural president of the World Anti-Doping Agency.
So what was that experience like for you, being the head of that agency?
It was interesting because it was not something that I had much experience in. Most of what I had done in the Olympic movement, or at least for the IOC, was running the television negotiations and the international marketing program. And, the doping aspect was meant to be in the hands of the international sports federations and the IOC Medical Commission. And I remember when we finally got it going, and the beginning of 2000, we said, all right, we got to get in the field now and start doing some testing before the games in Sydney. And when we started to do that, we discovered that an overwhelming majority of the international sports federations whose sports are on the program of the games did not even have rules that allowed them to test their athletes out of competition. And that was, I said, oh my God, have I ever been naive about this? Lots of people are talking the talk, but nobody is walking the walk. We spent most of 2000 getting the international federations to put rules in place that allowed testing to occur, and we did as much testing as we could. But it was they say, a real eye opener for me, and drew home the fact that there's a lot of talk going on here, but not much action.
Yeah, now I think with a lot of sports, especially whether it be international or here in the United States, we've seen a lot of, especially the past few decades at least, more, I don't know if you want to call it kind of curtain being pulled back or just a lot more cases of doping? Do you think it's become more just profound now because it's just there's more cases of it, or because we've just been able to pull back the curtain more?
I think nobody in the public at large had any idea of the prevalence of doping. And one of the things we did with Wada was to start turning over some of these rocks and finding what was going on, finding out what the supply lines were and what the drugs were that were being used and who was distributing them, all that sort of stuff, and sort of taking the fight to the bad guys.
Okay, yeah, because I know that there was a writer who said something that kind of sticks with me to this day about sports, where he was talking about Bo Jackson, who was a former football player and baseball player here in the United States, and he's to some seen as the greatest athlete of all time for people here in the United States. For some, he's up there with like Jim Thorpe and among others. But one writer got on, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name. He's got a very complex last name, but he wrote the book Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. For those who know that book will know who I'm talking about. And he talked about how Bo Jackson was seen as like this freak athlete. And he said that if Bo Jackson was an athlete today, instead of being back in the 1980s, we would have instantaneously just said steroids. Where today, kind of our innocence is lost with athletics, where we used to be able to go back and just look like, oh my God, that guy's such an amazing athlete. It's just all natural for him. Where today, if somebody like Bo Jackson or somebody else was to come on who was just such this freak or whatever, you'd hear at least some chatter about like, I think he's on steroids or something else like that. Like,
right.
Like, do you?
Well,
agree?
it's one of these things that if it seems too good to be true,
Yeah.
But by way of a performance, it probably is. And
Yeah.
and it's a shame because there are a lot of good athletes probably get unfairly suspected or accused simply because you don't see it coming, and so in most sports, if you go back to when somebody's 7 or 8 and starts into swimming or track and field or baseball, whatever it may be, you can see the progression coming along, and it's not just all of a sudden somebody goes from being 300th in the world to being first by a margin. And when that sort of thing happens, all the alarm bells go off now.
Yeah, because I know that. Oh, sorry.
No, I finished what I had.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I know that for people watching the Olympics recently, the most severe punishment has been handed out to Russia, which was pretty much given, for lack of a better term, a death penalty in some case, where there's still some athletes from Russia who are able to compete, but not under their flag of Russia, because Russia is pretty much, or I don't know the timeline for how long it's going to be that way, but they're not allowed to kind of compete under Russia. They have to compete under a different name. But has there been any other thoughts of any other countries getting severe punishments like that, or athletes getting banned, or is that just kind of something where it's kind of like you want the punishment to be severe so it doesn't allow people to think about like doing that again, because if they get caught, the punishment will be so severe so it kind of deters them from doing it?
Yeah, Russia has been suspended for the games in Tokyo and the games in Beijing.
Okay.
WADA had wanted a 4-year ban, but the Court of Arbitration for Sport, in its infinite wisdom, thought that 2 was going to be enough. I was disappointed because a 16-year-old swimmer who takes a tainted supplement gets a 2-year suspension as kind of the default penalty. And here's a country that for at least 10 years had a deliberate state-organized program that was designed to disrupt the entire international sports system and to steal results from athletes from other countries, including the United States and Canada. And they're caught and exposed, having denied everything, every single day since it was exposed, and they only get 2 years. I thought that was not proportionate to the seriousness of the conduct.
So during your whole entire time in the Olympics, was Russia the most like profound or gross example of behavior like this, or is there another example like it?
There are actually several. I mean, the best, and I'm putting that in quotes, were the East Germans back
Really?
in the 70s. They
Hmm.
were astonishing. There's still talk about the way they dominated women's swimming in the 70s and up to the early 80s.
Hmm.
And what the scientists were doing is they figured out that these anabolic steroids that they were describing to the athletes as vitamins, and the vitamins were compulsory in the program. And if something was compulsory in East Germany, it was compulsory. And they just dominated women's swimming, particularly in my city of Montreal. They looked like they were sculpted out of granite, and they had deep voices and all of the earmarks of a steroid program, which is indeed what it was. But they never tested positive because their technique was to keep people out of East Germany, and so they couldn't come in and test. And then when they came to events like the Olympic Games, the night before the competition, they would be tested secretly. And if it looked like they might test positive the following day, suddenly they got a bad cold or the flu, and they just didn't show up. So there were never any positive cases, even though you knew something was going on.
I mean, it's kind of interesting to think about that. How everybody has their own way of getting around it. And since we have a little bit of time left, there's two more things I want to talk to you about. And we're here with Dick Pound and WVCR at 8.3 The Saint, calling out controversy. And the first one being this Olympics in Tokyo will be taking place in the summer, and there will be no fans in attendance due to COVID. Do you think that takes away from the nature of the Olympics, or it's just something that has to be done due to the nature of the world right now at this point in time? So there's some competitors who have complained about not having fans. Like, what's your whole entire thing with it?
Well, I think when you get right down to it, the real essence of the games is the opportunity for those 11,000 athletes from all over the world to compete against the best in each of their sports. Spectators are nice to have, but they're not must-haves. And if you think about the fact that for any Olympics, 99.5 or even more % of the people who experience the games do so by way of television or some other electronic platform. And the spectators are sort of immaterial to that. So, there's a little atmospheric loss, if you like, but the real key is the competition and the fact that in the middle of all of this mess, we will have been able to put something on that will bring the world together. And we all need some good news at this point.
Yeah, because I know that last year the Olympics were postponed at the beginning of the whole entire COVID pandemic starting. I think it was back when it was an epidemic, not a pandemic yet. It was postponed, and it was kind of shocking for some people because like this is the first time that the Olympics have been postponed for a reason other than war.
Right.
And now you have all these questions where like, is it going to happen, or like, are athletes going to be made to wear masks during competitions? Like, for a lot of people, it's just a lot of things happen that confuse them, and they have a lot of questions about it. I mean, but as you said, it's just due to the way the world is right now, where like spectators are nice, but they're not necessary.
And this is a really unusual situation. That is there's nobody with any living memory of anything on this scale before. I mean, the Spanish flu back at the end of World War I was turned out to be far more virulent than this. Mind you, medicine has advanced quite a lot since that time,
Yeah.
but nobody's ever gone through something like this.
No, I mean, we haven't gone through. We've had epidemics, and I mean, I've had episodes of the show where we've talked with former Surgeon Generals of the United States or top researchers at Johns Hopkins, where we've gone through different epidemics throughout the history of the United States and the world, but we haven't seen a full-scale pandemic on this size since the Spanish flu. So it's kind of like we're living in a new world in some sense.
Yeah, and it may be that, as you say, the only 3 cancellations of the games has been a result of wars. Maybe pandemics are the new wars.
I mean, possibly. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that like the next 9/11 will be cyber versus actual physical warfare. So
yeah, that's right. It'll be the whole power grid goes down. It's not going to be boots on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people saying that traditional warfare is pretty much dead, and the next war is going to be something else that we've never seen before, which is interesting because our country wasn't even prepared for 9/11 when it happened, because they like saying the intelligence community was a failure of not of intelligence but of imagination, because nobody thought that a bunch of people sitting around a desert campfire in Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia or whatever country they were in could hijack airplanes with box cutters and then fly them into buildings. It just didn't register to people like Donald Rumsfeld or Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, who came of age in politics during the Cold War and the battle between nation states. It just didn't register.
No. It's always said that armies are now ready to fight the last war.
Yeah.
The previous war, not the last war.
Yeah. And so with this, because this question I'm kind of dying to ask you, it's because you've been involved with the Olympics. I mean, you were an Olympic athlete yourself back in the 60s, and you've been involved kind of all the way through without maybe like a 10, 15-year blimp in between there, where we had some things like the Munich tragedy in 1972 take place, which thankfully has not happened anything like that since then. Hopefully never will happen again. But looking back over your time with the Olympics and before that, who would you have to say are probably your top 5 Olympic athletes of all time?
Oh boy, that's so I'll eliminate all the swimmers. That
Okay.
suggests a bias. I would say, as he then was, Cassius Clay was certainly one.
Okay.
If you go back into the early runners, Paavo Nurmi and Vatapek and so on, were gigantic figures. Wilma Rudolph coming back from childhood polio to win the 100 meters in Rome. And so there are a lot of giants there. Teofilio Stevenson, the boxer from Cuba.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And it's unfair that several thousand I probably haven't mentioned that got to do with all of it. But there are some real heroes out there.
Yeah, because I know it's a question of much debate here with people in the United States, but then again, that question mostly comes up to people who are United States athletes. Because I remember watching Fox Sports one time, and one of the things that they kept on debating was who's the best athlete of all time, and it came down to Carl Lewis versus Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different personalities, different records, different sport, different times to some degree. Yeah.
Fun fact: Carl Lewis was actually drafted by Dallas Cowboys at one point in the NFL.
All right.
Yeah, because the Cowboys also
drafted. If he could hold on to the ball, he could certainly outrun the guys that be chasing him.
Well, he didn't sign with them because the Cowboys, their thinking behind it was they signed, they actually drafted Bullet Bob Hayes back in the 60s.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
And he wanted to have a Hall of Fame career not only in Olympic track, but also in the NFL. He's now in the NFL Hall of Fame as well. I think he might have also won the Super Bowl with the Cowboys. He might have been on the 71 team, or he might have retired before then. But he played in the NFL too. But one last question I have for you to go along with this, since we're coming very close to the end, is what is your favorite thing about what you do?
I would say that my favorite thing is that I have so many things to do, so that you never have a chance to get bored.
Yeah.
And, I used to sit in my office and I didn't know whether it was a tax problem because I'm a tax lawyer, whether it was a McGill University issue, which is there, whether it was a doping issue, an Olympic issue, some other charity stuff I did, and instead of being enervated by that, I was energized by it. It's just so exciting to say what's going to happen today, and what problem going to come up that will require some thought and analysis and defining the solution. So I've been very lucky in throughout my time since university, really.
Yeah, well, you've definitely have had a very prolific career, I will say. It's been very interesting learning all this stuff because I've learned a lot of stuff in this conversation that I didn't know before. So, I mean, it's been very joyful for me.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to have this chat, and sounds like you've got a pretty good program under your belt here.
Thank you. Well, this has been WVCR 88.3 Saint calling out controversy. Dick Pound, thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.